Still says we're about a minute away.
Hello, everyone.
There's Susan. So we're just missing Rebecca Lindor, who is a new appointee from Division 3, Mark Eisenhart, his appointee. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to a new year. And welcome to a new member, Mayor Allison Kerr. It's like you get elected president. You're always referred to as president from that point onward. So, Joelle, if you would call us to order and do a roll call, please.
Yes, I call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. Roll call. Panel member Tilly. You're muted.
Present.
Panel member Pinterest.
Present.
Panel member Urquhart.
Present.
Panel member Chrislock. Panel member Melton.
Here.
Panel member Linder. Absent. Panel member Kerr.
Present.
Panel member Schiavone.
Here.
We have a quorum of the panel.
And we have two attendees, both district related and none being Rebecca Lindor. So we'll keep our eye out for her. That being said, those members of the public who are there, we can accept comments from the public on anything that is not on the agenda. Seeing no hands raised, I think we're fine. We can move on from there. Action items. I've already said hello to our newest member, Allison Kerr. I think most of you were on at the time, except you, Susan, but you two know each other. So our other new member is Rebecca Lindor, who, as I said, has not joined us yet. Fran just got moved over as counsel, and Suresh is attempting to connect. We'll need Suresh, but not for this first item. So the first item, action items, is, oh, Rebecca is now on. So let's see.
And Suresh is on now.
Yes. But Rebecca is on as an attendee. Can you move her over?
Right. She'll be joining us as panelists.
I'm going to wait on that for a little bit. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And let the minutes reflect that she's joined, and we now have a full complement of all appointees. There remains one vacant appointee, and that's the mayoral appointee, and we'll be working with Ian Oglesby to get his direction on that one. So again, welcome everybody. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to take a minute. We all know Allison Kerr as being mayor of Delray Oaks, but if you want to just tell us a little bit about you and how Mark Eisenhart twisted your arm into taking this position? Pup, you're on mute. Rebecca, you're on mute. Sorry. There we go.
Okay, there we go. I'm a relatively new member to Monterey. I moved here in 2009, so I've only been here, oh, don't make me do calendar math.
It was
How
like,
long that is, 13 years, 14 years,
Yeah.
something like that. I am married. I work in a law firm here in downtown Monterey, and I met Mark. Actually, he worked in the same building that I did.
Oh.
And let's see, I volunteer. I'm actually a legacy volunteer at Monterey Bay Aquarium. We started that right when we first moved here. I've worked on financial committees for various nonprofit organizations. I have 2 daughters, grown, 2 grandkids, and I'm excited. Mark didn't really have to twist my arm too hard. I was looking forward to getting involved in something that was pertinent to the peninsula, and this was a very good fit for me. So I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
excellent, excellent. Well, welcome. And Joelle, make a note to send Rebecca a link to the charge for this committee. There's a little bit of description of how we were created and what we do, if Mark didn't share that with you.
Actually, I downloaded everything from the website. I have a notebook. I'm super organized.
Great. Well, then you're ahead of us. So bringing it back to, we were just getting started on action items. Item 1 is consider adoption of the committee minutes from October of last year. Take a motion or any edits or suggested changes. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion if there's no edits.
Okay, we'll give,
Second.
there we go. We'll give Kevin the motion and Susan the second. Sure.
Pat, are there any public comments for item number 1? Seeing no hands, I'll go ahead and conduct the roll call vote. Panel member Tilly,
Yes.
panel member Pinterest,
Yes.
panel member Urquhart, panel member
Muted.
Chris,
So I said yes, I had to unmute.
panel member Chris Lock,
Yes.
panel member Melton,
Yes.
panel member Linder,
Yes,
panel member Kerr.
I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't here.
Got it. Panel member Schiavone,
Yes.
the motion is adopted.
Excellent. Thanks.
Hey,
everybody.
Dave, I had a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
In the
absolutely.
minutes, it was mentioned that CalAm had a $279 million loan from the state revolving fund that had been rescinded because of lack of progress on their project. Is that still the status on that, or do you know?
Yes, it is still the status. The state revolving fund does what's called a notice of use or a use plan every year, reflecting what the priorities are. And they go through their priority list, and typically you can stay on that priority list for 2, 3, 4 years. Or if you're actually now in construction, but you had a delay, then they'll keep you on the list. But yes, in their use plan this June, I believe it was, they and another large scale project, 2 or 3 projects were taken off, and they have not yet been restored. And to be restored, you know, they'll have to come back and make the case. What had happened was there's 2 state revolving funds. One is for what's called the clean water side, and that's for wastewater projects, and the other's for the safe drinking water side, which is potable drinking water. And the state agency in charge of the potable drinking water fund did a very poor job at getting the money out. So it had been accumulating money. The state decided to bring it in under the same framework or the same basically staff as the clean water state revolving fund. And so when CalAm applied, they took CalAm's desal project and San Diego Clean Waters project, which is an advanced recycling project, and moved them both totally into the safe drinking water side and funded them up and said, you're now on the priority list. Doesn't mean it's automatic. You still have to apply. There's an engineering report and a bunch of environmental work and a whole list of things that you have to do in order to be fully qualified and then get an agreement in place. But they didn't keep that current. And so they fell off. But that doesn't mean they couldn't get back on the list, except that money is now being pushed out the door. So they, the opportunity was ripe because they had built up this large amount of money that they wanted to get lent to projects. And that may not be the case when they come back. So we just don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? All righty. So we can move on to the second action item, which is reviewing the annual report. I do thank several of you who gave me some suggested edits. I tried to incorporate those which made sense. And so there was a little bit of a change in what you see here versus what was emailed out. But as you probably prioritized it over 49ers football, you probably were reading this on Sunday. So if there are additional changes, I'd love to hear from you now. I'm trying to just be the scrivener in this case and reflect what you're thinking. Mayor Kerr and I did converse about what the key issues are and that they really haven't changed much in the last few years, and that we've been in this pattern. As long as we're building projects, we want to keep the money flowing, and some members want to sunset the charge, and that dissonance is going to continue, at least in the district's mind, until we start wrapping up some of the water projects. But hopefully the draft captured your thinking, and if you have additional changes or comments, I'd love to hear them. Marley, you want to open the discussion?
Well, I would like to say I appreciate having the majority and minority views. I suppose I'm in the majority in terms of thinking we should keep the water supply charge while there's still a use for it in expanding our water supply. I'm not sure the panel minority view is actually to retire the water supply charge, all of it immediately. If I'm not mistaken, and I'll let him speak for himself, I think I've heard John Tilley say he didn't think all of it should be retired immediately. That concludes my comment.
John, you want to speak to that at all, or?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Marley.
Yeah.
I would take the stand, Marley, that the minority view, my minority view is that the water supply charge has reached the expiration date. That it was not intended to be this late in the number of years since it was initiated, nor to have lasted this long. That it was, in particular, I sent an email to the board a couple times that just went back and looked at the origination of the water supply charge and the presentation that was given to the board and to the public over the initiation of the charge. And in looking at that, it just clearly, for me personally, seemed as if it was meant just to be in place as the user fee came in for a bit. And then once the user fee and the water supply charge were being collected currently, that seemed to me to be not appropriate. And even so, the water supply charge itself has gone far past its term of collection, and that the funds should have been just used right from the onset to pay it off the debt, rather than other just ongoing expenses. That's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Adam, go ahead.
For the sake of brevity, I agree with everything John said.
Yeah, and I think when we've talked about the minority view, we've kind of lumped you in with John, you know, MCAR and the Taxpayers Association being of like mind. But if you're ever not of like mind, please speak up, because you know, it's been brought to my attention that by saying majority view and minority view, you know, that could mean 5-4. It could mean, you know, 6-3, 7-2. So, and I do think our majority and minority have shifted through the years based on appointments and the director's perceptions of people, but also a little bit based on needs. So to John's point, you know, the district did reinstate the user fee, or won our court case at the Supreme Court in roughly 2015, I think it might be, or 14, but we didn't have the opportunity to reinstate the user fee until 2017. At the time it was reinstated, the district board adopted a policy to definitely collect both for a number of reasons. The user fee varies with CalAm revenues, and there was variability in that time, so we wanted to see what it would look like. But also because the user fee, when it was reinstated through negotiation with the Public Utilities Commission, replaced a mitigation surcharge on the bill and a conservation surcharge on the bill first and foremost. And Kevin, who's now on this committee, had built up a fairly sizable budget, saving fish, restoring habitat, and so forth. So this was a budget of, you know, several $1 million that with inflation has continued to grow and is still considered an obligation that, if unfulfilled by the district, is a contingent liability of CalAm. So the district continues to do it, but the language in the Ordinance 152 that says, to the extent monies are available, you know, that user fee had to pay off the things that were being paid for with the prior fees first. And then there are, you know, some question about additional obligations of the district. And I'll give you an example. I see Suresh is on. Suresh just informed me 2 days ago that our deductible for things like flood damage is $500,000, and our drought flood contingency only had $329,000 in it. And luckily, the damage that we sustained during this last raucous time with the river is probably going to run in the order of 150 to 200,000. It's more than enough, but now from a policy perspective, the goal will be to make that flood drought reserve equal to the deductible. We've talked about PERS liabilities and so forth. So there are other places that the district needs to start targeting monies. And so we've always had an eye looking at, well, how much extra is there going to be and at what point? Because you do know, you know, CalAm rates are going up, which means a percentage user fee on CalAm rates will be going up and generating more revenue. So clearly there should be a time when the user fee has surplus monies in it. But we're still building projects. And so the water supply charge that this panel was created to oversee or to be a watchdog on has been generating about 3.4 million every year. And we've been spending, you know, on average about 5.5 million every year on water supply projects and water quality monitoring and so forth. So we've just never gotten there. And so I think the judge, and we'll talk about the taxpayers lawsuit later, but I think the judge may, in her opinion, decide whether it's the first money in on the user fee or the last money in on the user fee that comprises the surplus to pay or to sunset the water supply charge. So, you know, our view is it's the tail end, but we don't know where she's going to land. But I think, to John's point, a lot of people say, hey, that charge is put back into place. Sure, the board adopted a policy to collect both of them for 3 years. That 3 years lapsed in 2020, or at the end of the 2020, 21, I think, fiscal year. Suresh, correct me if I'm wrong. So now we've collected it a fourth year. You know, the only thing that, you know, keeps me comfortable with it is we continue to outspend the revenues that come in. You know, 3.4 million isn't much, and we've been spending quite a bit on water supply projects, not just pure water Monterey base project, but all these pre-construction costs for the expansion. And then you may have seen our big, bold, beautiful new chemical building at ASR, which was, you know, roughly a $6 million project. So there's a need for it, in my opinion. But I think that what I'm hearing from John is, hey, it was supposed to be a stopgap. You got your user feedback, figure out your own priorities at the district and cut where you need, but, you know, retire this water supply charge. Which is why that's in the minority opinion, because most of this panel, and I would agree that most of the directors on my board aren't ready to retire it. So any other discussion though? Susan?
I just think, you know, we did make some changes a few years back and the board agreed about putting money aside to pay down the loan and to work towards a goal of ending it and sunsetting it. So I just think it's not going to happen as fast as the minority view would like, but I'm in the majority view. So I think it's still needed and it's a pivotal year, especially this year. And so I think it's really important to keep the financing going. So I think it's important for the district.
And I do think the, you know, the annual report is reflecting that, that there's a difference of opinion.
I had a question. Is it practice, policy, or good performance not to show the ratios? I mean, I don't care. I'm happy with just saying majority and minority, but I just wanted to ask that question. What's the normal practice and why do we do one thing or the other rather than saying 4-3 or, you know, whatever? I'm not asking for naming individuals, but kind of, it might give more weight to the minority opinion if it showed it was, you know, 40% of the group or something like that.
I wonder the same thing, Dave. About putting
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I saw a couple of heads nod too. So I think there's some agreement there. Yeah, that's, you know, in the past we said the panel, and then there were members of the panel who said, well, that's not really reflective of the difference of opinion on the panel.
At one time, I was the only dissenting minority.
Yeah. John, you've got your hand up and then we'll come back. But
Sure.
Kevin, that's a great question. I think that some people were thinking the same thing.
When we went to the minority, at one point there was a conversation about whether it should just be voted on by the panel, and then what the majority voted on would be the message. And we finally resolved that no, it's not really fair because it's supposed to be as many voices as want to be communicated, as you said earlier, Dave. And that is in the charge of the panel. If you read it, it's right in there. That's how this should be treated.
So to kind of comment on that to myself is I would be happy to go along with whatever the minority wants. In other words, if they just want it the way it is, it's fine with me. If they want to have a head count reflected with it without names, then I would be fine with that too. But I just wanted to bring it up and ask and leave it up to the group representing the minority opinion what they want to do.
I would prefer to have it majority minority.
You wouldn't like it if I say the minority view and you know who they are and like have a little emoji for rolling your eyes and then, you know.
No, I prefer majority minority because it makes it look like it's maybe close to 50-50 instead of more like, you know, 65-35, something like that. So,
And that's very deceptive, John. Why do you want that?
Mayor Kerr, you've got your hand up.
Well, I come, you know, from a recent world where everything is very transparent and names are named. And I think there's value to that. I mean, I think there's value to not only those that appointed us, but also the community that we're here to represent. I'm totally fine with having names named. Thank you.
Adam?
I don't have especially strong feelings on how we'd like to represent this in records, but I do think that it might perhaps, you know, lack clarity if we start mentioning the numbers or the ratios in outside of the context of an actual vote on an action item.
Yeah, I think that I would tend to agree with you on that one, that, you know, you could, well, let's keep going. Kevin, you go. And by the way, this is almost as interesting as Delray Oaks City Council meeting last night.
I didn't watch that.
Not even close.
Not even close. Go ahead, Kevin, you still.
I just was going to ask John, this isn't a challenge, this is actually a question, because many of you have been on this group longer than me. I don't read things the way he said, that there was a clear implication of a sunset date. So if he wanted to, send me a note or speak to the group about how he finds that, if that's appropriate for the agenda. Otherwise, he could just send me a note and I'd reread things. I don't read it that way, but maybe I would agree with him if he provided me some directive, you know what I'm saying, or some advice or some guidance.
I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. I'd be happy to do so, Kevin. I have to go back and look for it. I've sent it twice to the board itself as public record, so I could find it.
Yeah,
But I don't know if I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah, you are. What I wouldn't like to see is a series of emails that then Kevin shares it with somebody else and shares it with somebody else, and we get into kind of a serial meeting. But individuals can always have one-on-one conversations.
No, I've had all that Brown Act training too. I wouldn't want to see that either. But then I would say if staff could just send me his 2 public comment letters that he has sent, that would be it. And then I could go reread them. Thank you.
First one was June of like 2018. I want to say, to think about the year.
Yeah, I have that.
Yeah, we'll look and see. I do remember too. Marley, you have your hand up.
I don't want to move away from this topic if people want to keep discussing it, but I was going to ask something about the numbers part of the report.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yes, because I didn't include it, but Suresh just sent me both tables. And I think we're actually going to see some of that information. But yeah, go ahead, Marley. What's your...
last year, I think we filled in the blanks on the percentages. And this year I did, some quick back of the envelope calculations, but I thought, well, these are unaudited numbers. And so maybe Suresh is going to change these. So I didn't send anything to you. I was also curious about what is the capacity fee? I'm not sure I know what that is.
Yes.
And if it's still likely to go up, go down, stay the same?
Yeah, I'd say, well, so what it is when you come in to do a remodel, or if a business changes and they're going to move from, let's say, a retail store and become a full service restaurant. And so the amount of water used on the site is going to go up. They come in for a water permit. And so when you apply for a water permit, where your water is coming from is identified. So we know that it's not an increase in use against the river, that it comes from either a jurisdiction's allocation or an entitlement or a water credit, but it's coming from someplace where you can point to it that it's incrementally not an increase in just turning on the pumping harder on the Carmel River. And so when you buy in, you pay a capacity fee for more water being used in the system, meaning more regulatory work by the district, meaning you're now able to access conservation programs and all just the pent up costs of being a member of the district, like being a member of CalAm. And many utilities have connection fees where you come in and you pay a connection fee, or like in City of PG's case, if you bought an entitlement from PG, you pay the city for the privilege of having that piece of water because they made an investment in a project and so forth. So we do charge a capacity fee. It's based on an amount that was set almost 30 years ago that has increased with CPI. And so if you buy a 1/10 of an acre foot, it's like $2,400, that kind of thing. So,
Got it, yeah.
yeah, it won't go up a whole lot this year over last year.
And then my other, just an observation, is the project reimbursement an annual thing that's likely to continue at this level? Or is it something that just happened during the past fiscal year?
Yeah, it jumps around based on projects. If we have a project that has a grant behind it, then it'll be reimbursed from grants. And that'll be just kind of a one-time thing for 1 or 2 years. If it's a large scale project, but let's say, for example, at Aquifer Storage and Recovery, there may be a CalAm reimbursement. So if we rehab a well and we deem it to be maintenance, then it will go into the O&M budget and it'll get reimbursed by CalAm, but it'll still show up as a project expense. So yeah, it depends on what your projects are year in and year out.
Okay, so that's a variable thing. Anyway, I noticed that the water supply charge is the second most important source of revenue for the district. And given our need for water supply, I would not like to see the district try to do without that.
And I think
And that it is an annually recurring, so it makes it reliable. And I suppose it certainly could be scaled down if it became more than what could be used.
oh, absolutely. And I think you're echoing kind of district staff's opinion as well. It's a very reliable and predictable source. As I said, it's not really been enough to do all the water projects that we wanted. So if we had thought it through a little more, and when you think about how difficult it was to put into place, we probably should have set it a little higher. But instead, we've been borrowing from ourselves through reserves, as well as borrowing from Mechanics Bank. But you're right; it's the second largest revenue source to the district, and we are still in a building mode, which is why we have a difference of opinion, I guess.
It would be nice if it could be used to build some of the infrastructure that we need now for aquifer storage and recovery.
Yeah. That's a half-hour discussion.
Sorry.
That's all right. Adam, you have your hand up.
Sorry to belabor this, but question for you, Dave, since you say that it's not enough for the projects, right, and the building the infrastructure and all that. Would it be enough if it was being used exclusively for that, rather than having some of it being used for Measure J related activities?
It hasn't been used for Measure J related activities yet. I think that there's a notion that we're going to need all the money we can have for Measure J, which is why some people want to just keep it all coming. But if it was used only for brick and mortar, then it probably is close to being enough. We still owe ourselves just under $6 million, and then whatever's left on the Rabobank loan, so that's 2.1 million. So, about 8.1 million has been expended. So that's almost 3 years worth of collections. But we've been paying for the people who work on these projects, and we've been paying for some of the monitoring. So managing the resource, so the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System is the Seaside Groundwater Basin and the Carmel River Basin, and 100 different monitoring wells so that you can check levels. So there's a lot of that kind of work that is also paid for by the water supply charge, because it's it's an integrated water supply system. So if we did none of that, then probably it would have been enough for all the brick and mortar work. John.
Real quickly, I think that the water supply charge backfills the budget of the district at large, and therefore does borne some of the cost of Measure J. And from my mind, at this point, Measure J, the biggest concern for Measure J for me is potential loss and the numbers of millions of dollars that could be owed by the district given a potential loss in the long run on Measure J attempts, as has occurred in other districts throughout California. I think that when you look at the budget and just the risks of operations and so forth of the district, that really has to be an important number of people holding in mind.
I'm curious, Dave, do you have any idea what the average taxpayer pays annually?
On the water supply charge?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really varies because so basically Proposition 218, which was one of the Gann-Jarvis tax acts that got approved through time, along with Prop 26 and what was the first one, 13, that limited property taxes back when we were all still students and babies and so forth back in the 70s. So Prop 218 in effect says your fees and charges can only be proportional to the services you provide, and you cannot provide a subsidy. So what that means is if you're a water and wastewater system like Marina Coast Water District is, you can't pay for water supply with your sewer fees. It also means that you can't subsidize a low-income ratepayer program on the backs of the other ratepayers. So it's very much oriented towards proportionality to the services provided. So when we did an allocation, we had one of the highly qualified financial advisors come in and say, all right, we're going to break housing into 3 housing types: single family, small, single family, medium, multifamily. We're going to look at cemeteries and open space. And so there's a long laundry list of categories of the type of property being benefited. And so each property has a different fee or charge. And so that's a form of, reallocating the total budget on a proportionate basis to the end users, the properties themselves. And so it's really impossible to say what's typical, but I during the course of this, I could go pull up the, actually, I'll reach in a file here and just grab it in a second. I'll give you a couple examples.
I can give you some rates, Dave, on single family homes that's less than 1,200 square foot. They pay about $40 a year.
Yeah.
Again, residential homes that are between 1,200 square foot to 2,000, they pay about $55 a year. Homes between 2,000 to 4,000 square foot, they pay about $97 a year. And same thing for, anything over 4,000 square foot, they pay about $175 a year.
And go grab one from a business, maybe a restaurant or something.
Yeah, so a typical restaurant, let's see, business, restaurants that's serving 3 meals a day, they pay about $7.28 per seat a year, plus the size of the meter.
Right. So, it's a very small amount, but, that's the theory of aggregating up. You can, spread big dollars across a big base. But as an example, Monterey One Water has traditionally billed their sewer services. And keep in mind, sewer services aren't something you can meter because it's a direct connection to the home. And so they have a similar system of allocating it based on the type of use, which can increase the biological oxygen demand, or BOD, as well as the size of use. And they've been direct billing. And when a customer doesn't pay for an extended period of time, because you can't shut off a meter, they will lien the property. And so that's why you see typically every December or so a list of delinquent customers that they're going to lien. They want to get out of that business, and they want to shift their charge to, it's still a fee or charge related to service, but to have the assessor collect it for them because as we know, property taxes are the thing you fear the most about not paying. And so like the North County Mosquito Abatement District is collected on the same tax bill as your property taxes. It's not considered a tax. But I think in Adam's world, anything that appears on a property tax bill has that look and feel of a tax, certainly affects how you view your home cost, annual cost. And so we've always had from MCAR just a blanket, no, nothing on the property tax bill. The Taxpayers Association has always said, well, if it looks like a tax, smells like a tax, walks like a tax, even if you tell me it's not a tax, it feels like a tax. So they've had a blanket no. And so here Monterey One Water is going through this desire to shift from a direct billing to putting it on the assessor's bill. And they're getting pushback from both those organizations, just, kind of a blanket, don't you dare. I think, if I characterize it correctly, Adam or John, but I think you've had conversations. I know Jeff Davey talked to Monterey One Water. I'm assuming you guys probably had those conversations at this point. So,
Yeah, Dave. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
But just a brief conversation with them, actually more by email. And the one thing I pointed out that seemed relevant is that when you're a restaurant and you're operating, you are the one producing that waste. That's therefore you should be the one paying the bill. But if you shift it over to the property tax, now you've shifted that operating expense over to the property owner. And is that right? That was the only point I made about it, although there's many others.
Yeah, and we get we've had those conversations both in my current role and previous roles about how do you pass things through, because then it becomes, if the bill goes to the property owner and not the tenant, then the property owner has to pass that through, and so it changes the business relationship between a landlord and a tenant. And these are things that we like the billing because it works really well and it costs us very little. And just as an aside to the rest of the group, talking about wastewater, if you live in Pebble Beach, your COD wastewater costs and your Pebble Beach Community Services costs are on your property tax bill. Elsewhere, if you're in the COD wastewater area, it's on the property tax bill. So it's not unusual. It's just when it's new, it looks different. So
It's interesting just to have a sense of this $40 to $100 annual charge on a water bill compared to what CalAM's charging for water, just to have some perspective there as far as the burden on the end users that don't actually produce profit, just the residential users. That's interesting. I really wondered, that how much it was. So it's a fraction, a tiny amount compared to our water bills.
well, on Sunday, I finally looked at my Comcast bill, and I've discovered I've been paying about $49 more per month than I knew I was for things that I must have signed on for. Like a good series comes out on Stars or something. You go, I really want to watch that. So you join, and then you forget that you joined, and it just stays there. So I have 3 of those. I even called my kids going, do I have HBO Plus because you guys are using it? And they're like, no, we use Connor, my other son. So I'm like, why am I? So I'm paying more in phantom Comcast fees than I would for this water supply charge.
I think we're certainly, everyone on the peninsula is getting their money's worth from this water supply charge. Thank you to the Water Management District for good water management.
So coming back around full circle, we're just going to keep it majority view and minority view, not name names, and just let it hang out there that it could be 5-4 or it could be 8-1 for all we know. I think the message is more important than who's who. I did my best to incorporate the comments that I received last week, so I'm not hearing any more editorial comments. Marley's right. I need to fill in the numbers and then attach the 2 financial tables, because I thought that was a good look last year.
Mhm.
We did add a list, summary list of the types of projects that have been funded, which I thought was a very good suggestion. So with all of that, is this pretty much ready to go to the board?
I would say so, yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in, roll call. Sorry, Joel.
The motion was by Tilly, seconded by Schiavone.
Yep.
All right, is there any public comment on item number 2? Seeing no raised hands, I'll go ahead and conduct the roll call vote. Panel member Schiavone,
Yes,
panel member Kerr,
I'm going to abstain again for the same reasons I wasn't part of last year.
got it. Panel member Linder,
Yes,
panel member Melton,
Yes, I hope to see the final version as soon as it's ready.
panel member Chrislock,
Yes,
panel member Urquhart,
Yes,
panel member Pentritz,
Yes.
panel member Tilly.
Yes.
The motion is adopted.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, and that'll be on the February 13th agenda, so if you want to speak to it, that's still going to be a remote meeting, because I don't think our hybrid setup's ready to go, so you can do that from your home. But that will be, I'm sure we'll see some of you then. So that takes us to discussion items, the first of which is Suresh reviewing the revenue and expenditures. As we look at fiscal years to date, keep in mind that because we collect the water supply charge on the assessor's bill, we get it in chunks. So it's not like every month it's coming in, and so that, the numbers look a little funny, but go ahead, Suresh.
Great, thanks, Dave. So we have 3 exhibits here, A, B, and C. Exhibit 3A is the water supply charge receipts. Simply put, that's just showing water supply charge, how much was collected over what was budgeted. 21-22, so fiscal year that's concluded, but looking at fiscal year 22-23, you can see we budgeted $3.4 million. So far collection is 0. The first chunk, as Dave said, came in December, and that's normal. So about 60% of the fee is going to be collected in December. The second chunk is going to come in April. That's going to be about 35%, 30 to 35%. And the final chunk, very small piece, will come in June. So when we update these numbers for the next go around, we will definitely have the December collections in there. So you'll see about 60% of it is collected. Exhibit 3B, which is the chart that shows some small numbers in there. The numbers that we are reporting for is fiscal year 22-23, and on top, between the title and the heading of the column, you'll see it says through 11/30/2022. So that is through what we are reporting on these expenditures and revenues for the fiscal year. So you'll see our revenue. The only big chunk in there is the PWM water sales, which is pure water Monterey water sales. We do buy water from Monterey One Water, the reclaimed water, and we turn around and sell it back to California American Water Company. And so you'll see the revenue section, here's that $5.4 million in the revenue line. And then under the project expenses, the bottom section, you'll see the same amount, the equivalent amount in the PWM project water purchase. So that just shows the pass through. We bought the water, turned around, sold the water. So on the revenue side, we're doing the recognition of the revenue. And on the expense side, project expenses, we'll see the expenses. Nothing major on the revenue side yet. User fees, small piece of is being collected every month. But again, that's just a small piece. The water supply charge, the property tax are going to get updated with the December collections. On the expense side, everything comes through basically getting paid every month, except on the project expenses side. That one will basically dictate what projects are getting done and on what timeline. But you'll see the direct personnel, we break out the personal cost between the direct and indirect. So direct personnel on top, and then about on that same section towards the bottom part, you will see indirect labor. Same thing with the supplies and services. We break it out between direct and indirect. And then the project expenses, the reimbursements, and the regular project expenses, we break out the details in the bottom. The top number is just a recap of the bottom. So $6.102 million is the total of 5.9 plus the 111,000. So that is $6.1 million. And then fixed asset purchase is all our capital asset purchase throughout the year, what we bought so far. So all in all, our collections on the revenue side through November 30th was $5.9 million. Total expenses was $7.1 million. So we're in the deficit for the year right now, 1.2. But that's just because we have not recognized some of those major revenues. On the project expenses, we did have some reimbursement expenses. We did have the PWM project expansion, and then some of the other small ticket items on the project expenses side. Dave, do you want to highlight any of those?
No, because it's so early in our fiscal year that you know, there hasn't been a lot. And as Suresh has pointed out, this, you know, the water purchase line now really skews both the district's total annual budget as well as the revenues and expenses, because primarily it's a wash. We did or we will acquire water for an operating reserve, which is a district asset. So the payments for water and the receipts for water will not line up by the end of the year, because we pay for all of it, and then we put some in our reserve, and the rest goes to CalAm. But other than that, no, it's, you know,
Yeah, we do track that separately, Dave, the reserve water.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, $1.2 million is what's budgeted.
Yep. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is the subject lines speak a lot more than the dollar figures do at this point, because it's so early in the fiscal year that it's better to just see what's coming in, what's going out, and what are the water projects that are being expended on.
John has a question.
Yeah. You're on mute.
Sorry. It's on that operating reserve indeed. Was this the one that was discussed at our last meeting? The 3,000 acre foot that was being purchased?
Yeah, it's not 3,000, it's 1,750. And it just sits in the ground because the form of contract that CalAm was willing to offer for pure water was what's called take and pay, which means if you deliver the water, we'll pay for the water. Whereas with the regional desal project that ultimately failed, it was what's called a take or pay. And what that means is they would pay a sufficient amount to cover the debt service, the fixed costs, even if water wasn't delivered. And the nuance is in a take or pay contract, that means you could not be delivering the product, but your debt is covered so you don't default. In a take and pay contract, if you don't deliver, you can't pay your debt. And so we had to build a reserve that would be sufficient to cover an outage at the plant. And so originally it was contemplated to be about a half year, 6 months worth of outage that could be covered. And so on a 3,500 acre foot a year contract, 1,750 acre feet is the operating reserve, but it doesn't have to be fully funded until the third year. And so we're at about 1,200 acre feet now, and we'll be at 1,750 sometime in October.
Thank you.
Sure.
Moving on, Exhibit 3C, some panel members wanted to see a simplified version of the.
Actually, could I just interject with a very silly question? Is the year July to June?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the water rate is set for the year during the budget, which is why he's always been so precise on the budgeted amount for the water purchased and the amount received for the water purchase.
I have a good crystal ball, Dave. Exhibit 3C is a result of some panel members wanted to see the same information in a much more simplified version and then excluding some revenue. So you'll see the only revenue on top is the water supply charge. And then all of the project expense, all of the expenses. And then towards the bottom, the other revenue sources only includes the grants, project reimbursements, and PWM water sales, but it does not have the connection charge. It does not have any of those interest earnings. Doesn't have the property tax or user fee, but that's what some of the property members wanted. Some of the committee members wanted to see that. So that basically shows if you're using only the water supply charge towards the cost center, you'll see that every year we've been in the deficit. And so accumulated deficit through November 2023, it's about $13.8 million. That's because the water supply charge is not enough to fund all of the expenses in that cost center. So that's
Any
all I have.
questions on this one? All right. Okay, we still have no members of the public other than one of our directors, so I don't think there will be any public comment on this topic.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Under the water projects, it said ASR expansion. Are you expanding ASR? Or I kind of have the same question Marley had. Like, could you build another ASR well so that we weren't captured by CalAM's limitations?
Yeah, so we budgeted for a new well to kind of help out CalAM when we took away ASR well number 1. And we had a couple of sites. They don't seem to be working out. The idea was to build a well that CalAM could use for the next 2 to 3 years while pure water expansion was getting built, and then the city of Seaside could ultimately acquire that well as a replacement for their municipal well, for their tiny little municipal system. That's not working out, but it's a placeholder for if we can find a site to do another extraction well faster than CalAM can do it, then we might do it so that we can get them weaned from using our ASR well number 3. Well, they own it, ASR well number 3. So then we could actually inject more water in ASR 3 and 4. But of course, we're going to, timing wise, we won't be able to do anything for this rainy season. So that would be, prospective for next year. So yeah, we had that. And then we're also looking at kind of offline, you'd asked about our water right on the Carmel River. We are looking into the functionality of ASR all the way up in the Tularcitos Creek area, which is, up the valley, as potential additional drought reserve, or, you could use it and actually release it to the creek for environmental flows, to increase flows during the summer months. So there's some of that work that's still going on.
Great.
Yep. So I've gotten myself into a bind because I have to get on a Zoom at 2 that's probably going to last 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm going to let Dave Laredo update you. There's not much more than what's in the staff note on the Taxpayers Association, but you may have some conversation or question that he can help you with. And then Suresh can walk you through item 5, which means we won't have time for item 6, which is water supply gossip, for which I apologize. But Suresh, you can run the rest of the meeting. And I bid you adieu. Thank you very much for coming. And Joelle, this will stay on if I leave because you're in control, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Haven't met all of you. I'm Dave Laredo. I'm General Counsel to the Water Management District. And this is agenda item, discussion item 4. And it's an update on the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayer Association lawsuit. That should be in the plural, lawsuits. What we're talking about is what we call Monterey Peninsula Taxpayer Association 2 and 3. There was a MPTA 1 That was an initial challenge brought by the Taxpayers Association to the original collection of the water supply charge. The water supply charge was authorized in June of 2012. The original MPTA 1 was filed in 2013. That went to the trial court. Their contention was that the charge was not properly imposed for a variety of different reasons. The trial court heard that and ruled in favor of the district. After that, the Taxpayers Association appealed it to the 6th District Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the district, and no further action was taken on that case. We now have Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association 2 is challenging the continued collection of the water supply charge. And as part of the district's defense of that, we commented that the MPTA 2 was not properly formatted procedurally, and that it should have been done as a validation action. And I think MPTA, in abundance of caution, filed their 3rd lawsuit as a reverse validation matter. And I think that was just in case the district was accurate in their challenge, in their response to the challenge. So at the moment, the 2nd Taxpayers Association lawsuit is the one that is current. And they're asserting that the continued collection exceeds the authority of Prop 218, and that the sunset provision in the ordinance is a mandatory sunset provision that should be triggered. The district's response is that Prop 218 has not been violated, and that the sunset provision allows for a discretionary action of the board, and that the board has considered that and has not chosen to sunset. The MPTA's request for relief is that the court compelled the district to stop collecting the charge. And at the moment, the matter has been submitted to the trial judge. The trial judge is Judge Panetta. Held the hearing on this in December. And the court, though, has not yet ruled on the matter. The matter has been taken under submission. And under court rules, you can have a matter under submission for 90 days, although I know of cases that have actually been under submission for longer than that. The bottom line is that the only thing that's now on calendar is that there is a further case management conference before Judge Panetta on April 4th. So I would anticipate that by April 4th, we will have a tentative ruling or at least some other direction. I'm not going to speculate as to what Judge Panetta might do, but once a decision is made, then of course either party can appeal that to the 6th District if they're not content with that and want to continue challenging it. That is where we are with this case, and I don't think it's appropriate to comment any further as to in terms of district's options, but I certainly would open it for any discussion or questions.
I have a question. How much money has the district had to put out to pay for all of these taxpayer lawsuits from the beginning?
I don't have that number. I know that Suresh would have that, but I don't think he would have that at his fingertips. So if that's something, Suresh, do you have that?
Not on my fingertips. We can definitely bring
that's
it back
something that
as
we can get back to you.
That would be nice to know.
Yes.
That
At
was
the same
my-
time, it is a cost of doing business. And anyone has the right to challenge on any number of matters. So it's unfortunate, but it's the cost of doing business.
Right, but it's also the cost to the taxpayers.
That's correct. John, you're on mute if you are trying to make a comment.
I would say that's just like Measure J. It's also an expense to the taxpayers for legal proceedings.
Yes.
Yes, but the voters voted for Measure J. We didn't vote to be sued by the Taxpayers Association.
Nor did we vote for the water supply charge.
If I were in court, I would object that this is all argumentative.
It is.
I was about to say that. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, if we don't have anything more, we'll move along to the next item.
Actually, Dave, I have a question.
Yes.
How does having a member of an entity that is actively suing the district, how does that, I guess this isn't a legislative board or anything, so there really isn't.
Well, we always have to be worried about conflicts of interest and bias.
Yeah.
If we're applying a conflict of interest analysis, then the question is, does the individual have a personal economic interest in this that's different from the public at large? And I would suggest that there is no member that has a direct economic interest that's
Ooh,
different
I don't
from the
know.
public at large.
I don't know. Not sure about that.
Okay.
I appreciate your answer, Dave.
But then there's the second question about is there a bias? And then that would then depend as to whether or not there is a legislative decision by the body or an adjudicatory. This body does not have adjudicatory authority, so there is no question there. You are free to have your biases. And that's in fact, I believe, why some of you have been appointed, is because you have a very clear perspective, and it's expected that you'll enunciate that. John, you wanted to have a different perspective.
I do, but I think I would be smarter not to say it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the next item, number 5.
Right, so item number 5 is the update on Mechanics Bank loan refinancing or payoff. So at our October 2020 board meeting, our board adopted a policy that if our user fee collections for that in that given fiscal year, if it exceeded the budget, then they set up 3 priorities. One of them was to pay off the Mechanics Bank loan, a portion of it. Second one was to repay, if there's excess above that, then go ahead and repay reserves that was used for the water supply project cost. And then finally to apply towards the sunset of the water supply charge. So our user fee budget, actual collections did exceed the budget, but not by a whole lot. It did exceed by about $500,000. And so that's what we did, was we went ahead, the fiscal year closed on June 30th, 2022. By the time our final audit was all said and done, we did finally make a payment just this month, about 2 weeks ago, $500,000 to reduce the balance for the Mechanics Bank loan. And so now that after applying that $500,000 repayment, our balance with the Mechanics Bank stands at about a little over $2.1 million. We'll continue making the final payment that is due on June 30th of this year. And then after that, the balloon payment is due on July 1. So we are actively talking to Mechanics Bank right now to see what options we have, either about the payoff or refinancing options. So once we've made contact with the Mechanics Bank representative, they just have not come back with any options or whatever options are available to us at this point. But I'm hopeful that by the time we have our next meeting, we'll definitely have more information for the group. And we will definitely let you know what all options were provided to us and what options the district will pursue.
So is there not a balloon payment due at some point or something fairly soon?
Yeah, the balloon payment is due on July 1.
On July. And will we meet before that time or?
Yeah, I believe our next meeting is going to be in between.
Right around then.
Yeah, we are meeting either 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay. So by then you'll know kind of what the options really will be.
Definitely, we'll know what the options were provided by Mechanics Bank, what options our board decided to pursue. And depending on when the meeting is, whether it's before or after the board meeting, we'll definitely let you guys know whatever we find out. Molly has a question.
Yes, does the district have other banking relationships that could provide refinancing if the board should decide to do that? Besides the Mechanics Bank? Yeah. Am I muted?
Frozen. No, it looks like
Suresh
Suresh.
dropped off for some reason.
Oh,
I think we'll have to wait for him to rejoin. I think you're right.
Yeah.
and I guess my other question, maybe some of the people who've been on the committee longer than I have know. What was the original Mechanics Bank loan was for what? To help with Pure Water Monterey
I believe it
or
was for ASR and,
aquifer storage and recovery?
uh-huh.
Wow. Kevin, in that package you'll see that there is actually reference to the Mechanics Bank loan, if not the actual document. Their expression of interest letter, and that expression of interest letter discusses the water supply charge being intimately tied to the repayment of that note, expected to do so during the period of the note itself.
I'm in contact with Suresh right now, so I'm gonna see how he's gonna be rejoining in, if he's gonna be joining in by Zoom or by phone.
Thanks, Joel. I would like an answer to that question though, about from whence the original loan came from, how that fits into this ordinance 152. Was there a need for that money, therefore we needed a supply or a new fee? Or were there legal issues around that time that necessitated, I think Dave would probably know that.
Dave knows that about CalAm not collecting the user fee and et cetera.
Oh,
Suresh has rejoined us. Suresh, the question is, what were the reasons for the original loan being taken?
Yeah, it was to fund the ASR project. At that point, our user fee was not restored. And we needed funds to continue work on the ASR project. Also, we had spent some of our own reserve money towards the ASR project. So part of it was about quarter of it was used to repay our existing.
So if I may, Suresh, you've been breaking up here. Before the mechanics loan was entered into, the district was borrowing internally. It was borrowing against some of its fund reserves to continue the efforts. And so the mechanics loan was taken in part to replenish the internal borrowings that the district had undertaken and to restore those balances. And so it was just as a way of cash management.
Because the user fee was no longer.
That's correct.
Being collected, yes.
got it. Okay.
Thank you. And then when the user fee came back, it was time for the water supply charge to go away.
We don't agree.
Well, the user fee is quite small in comparison to the water supply charge. So the user fee could not have handled all of the balance and repayment of the loan, and still cannot.
And just a comment from Kevin, having been on both sides, the user fee is predominantly not for water projects. At least it was at the time. Ballpark staying, and Suresh can correct me, and 1/3 was for conservation to keep us from going over the limits and getting fined and penalties from the state water board. 1/3 was for the legal mitigations required by the water board decisions and by Fish and Game, Cal Fish and Game, now called Cal Fish and Wildlife, by the National Marine Fisheries Service. And then 1/3 had been used historically to do things like make progress on ASR phase 1. So yeah, if you want to build bigger water projects and you want to come to other solutions, ballpark 2/3, more than 50% of the user fee is not available for that. It has to meet your other legal mandates.
Yeah, it's actually, just to correct you, Kevin, it's actually much more lesser than that. It's only 1.2% of the entire 8% collection comes towards the water supply charge. The remainder of the 7% goes towards the mitigation and conservation. There's no set number between those two, but it's basically based on the needs. But predominantly what we've been doing is using more of the mitigation money to fund the water supply projects. And then what we are also doing is the almost in its entirety, from some years, we've been funding the entire $2 million property tax money to channel into the water supply charge account so that we're able to fund for the projects. Because, if you remember the PWM project cost and the ASR, the chemical building, all of those exceeded in the water supply charge collections for those given years by far more than what was collected. So we have been kind of like internal borrowing and funding for the water supply charge.
Marley, did that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you.
And on the other question, which was the legal cost on how much it has been spent on the MPTA, Joel, would you make a note so that we can bring that as a next on the next meeting as an agenda item?
All right, got it.
Thank you.
That takes us to the next item, which is, as Dave said, no water supply gossip, but we're definitely open to for suggestions to be placed on future agenda.
I'm sure we'll have another update on the legal status at the next meeting as well on these cases. Thank you.
No doubt.
Yeah. Update on then also the refinance.
Yeah, we'll definitely have the refinance on the Mechanics Bank.
Right.
Mhm.
I have a technical question. The outlines or the responsibilities indicate that we meet quarterly. How often have you been meeting?
There was a period when I think it was not quite 4 times a year, but I think there was some movement to make it sure we are doing more quarterly meetings now.
I think there was some contemplation whether to have 3 meetings or 4 meetings, and then I think the committee decided to have 4 meetings, continue with the 4 meetings, I believe. So it has been almost on a quarterly basis, but not exactly on a quarterly, and sometimes it's been off by a month or so.
Well, I think there was some disruption with COVID.
Definitely.
Well, since there's no suggestions.
Well, so are we thinking then April for the next meeting?
Joel will definitely float out the dates and see what date works out for the rest of the committee members. But most likely in April.
Maybe before or after April 4th, Dave, Laredo, which you think would be most interested in this group?
Are you muted, Dave?
Yeah, I think it's important to stay on a quarterly basis and not try to overly pick when it's going to be right. Your input this next time will help inform the budget. And even if the litigation is not known and has a known result, there's still enough, I think, for you to talk about.
Great. Well, I don't have anything else to say.
All right, we ready for adjournment?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.